Now, we're here at the Bloodstock Festival. Now, I'm going to get your name wrong, so I'm going to get you to pronounce it.
So we are Adfeilion.
Now, I saw you guys, you were playing on the new Blood stage about 11 o'clock. Are you one of the Battle to the Masses winners?
So we are one of the Metal to the Masses winners. We qualified in the South Wales area, and it was an incredible experience, to be honest. We're very, very honoured to be here, for one, because in the final, it was called the Day of Reckoning, there were 6 of us, so 5 other bands, and they were all so deserving to be here, so we're very, very honoured that we were given this opportunity to play on the new Blood stage today.
Did that involve a lot of heats to get to that final?
The journey spanned 4 different heats. So we had the initial heat, and then we had the quarterfinals, then the semi-finals, and the grand final in the Patty Pavilion in Swansea.
Okay, and was this like a Welsh final? Was it a regional final?
Yes, South Wales. So the best 3 bands in Cardiff were on the semi-final stage, and the best 3 bands for Swansea united for 6 bands in the grand final at Swansea.
So that must have been, even getting to the final must have been a great experience, and then to have won it, presumably.
We entered a Battle of the Bands competition last year in Swansea, and that was the first competition we'd ever done, and we realised sort of in that competition that people really connected to the music we were creating, because before that we really didn't know how people would take it and how it would go down. It was at the end of the Battle of the Bands competition, which again we are so honoured to have won. We were recommended to apply for the Metal to the Masses. It was very difficult to know how that would go down, because whilst we could see that there were people that were really into the music that we play, I would say, is half sort of gent metal, but the other half is sort of Celtic ambience. So when you're bringing that to a purely metal competition, it's really hard to know how that would go down. So going through all the competition, all the various rounds, and then to the final and winning is sort of beyond our wildest dreams.
And you are an instrumental band as well, so presumably that adds complexity or difference, perhaps.
Absolutely. The complete removal of lyrics really does give you an obvious difference to almost all of the bands. There's only one band I know of at Bloodstock called Cobra, who also came to Metal to the Masses, that we're very excited to see tomorrow, that I believe are also instrumental. We're big fans of atmosphere, of immersion, and genres that really influence that, like post-rock, post-metal, and even electronic ambience and Sybient and things like that. So for us, being instrumental was really at the core of what we wanted to achieve with the music, which was the sense of immersion, the sense of atmosphere, and the sense of mysticism. When you remove the lyrics, it really does sell this idea of, wow, this is a strange other sound that you can't quite relate to because there's no human voice to really connect with, but there are all these other sounds going on that are painting these pictures, and that really, for me, sells the story of an ancient land, of a mystical land that you can't quite access, but you'd want to go there. So it's a big part of our sound. However, we do incorporate storytelling to really add that human element between songs. So we feel if people do need that extra bit of context to enjoy the music and the stories, that's there for them to enjoy as well.
Presumably writing this and playing this and then performing it are 2 different things. Has it taken a while to sort of get that format right?
I'd say it has. It's incredible, I suppose, how quick we have come to play in Bloodstock, because we've only been doing this for about 2.5 years, but it was initially intended to be a studio album, so I personally never saw that it was possible to play what we had originally written in the studio live not only because we didn't have the people to do this with us, but because it was quite difficult to understand how that would translate to a live audience. But when we entered Battle of the Bands, it became clear that we needed to make sure that this was something that could be done live, and so that's when we first introduced an acoustic drum kit. Before that, it was all electronic, largely. And so it was through Battle of the Bands and then through Metal to the Masses that the sound has evolved and has become very, very accessible to be played live. And so, yes, to answer your question in summary, it has gone on a very wild journey to get to the sound that you hear today.
We also were very intentional about wanting to create all the music ourselves, so there's no click track, there's no backing tracks, and that took a long time to try to fit everybody together, who's playing what, where, and gel together as one complete sound. A lot of people who entered the band who are fantastic now, they were a bit unfamiliar with not playing with lyrics and also not playing with any kind of clicks or triggers to give them triggers of when songs change. So it really, I think, gave us this chemistry and bonding that took quite a while to develop over rehearsals, but now that it's there, it's so strong, and if anything happens on stage and something changes, we can adapt so fast because of that bond that we've got together, which I really, really enjoy.
I kept looking for your flute or whistle player and then realised, oh, there isn't one, it's keyboard.
We'd love to incorporate some more acoustic instruments in the future. We have tried in the past. For example, we used to play with a cello player, Rachel, was fantastic. Unfortunately, she moved away to Ireland. But we also found with acoustic instruments like cello, it's hard to mix it, especially if you've got a quick sound check, a quick line check, to be able to properly get the microphone set up and to come through over distorted guitar is difficult. So we have the jaw harp and we have the nylon guitar, and we'd like to experiment in future with more.
And I would add to that, so I play the nylon guitar, and that is one of our acoustic instruments. The other thing we incorporate is a jaw harp, which comes from sort of Siberia and these parts of the world, but really does fit with that mystical element. It's a sound that a lot of people might not have ever heard before, and so that's another acoustic instrument. And of course we use the acoustic drums, but everything else is synth and then electric guitar, and somehow the two work really well together, especially when we're trying to create these long ambient moments which are largely electronic, with then the subtle acoustic influence on top going into this sort of dirty, djent sort of riffs. It creates a very interesting contrast.
Presumably, I mean, that's why you're telling the story between, because there must be stories and there must be presumably tied into sort of that Celtic past as well, and presumably without the lyrics you can't get those across. So is that where the storytelling came in?
So the storytelling is an anchor for the audience to remain in the same sphere that we're trying to create, but when they're listening to the music, often of which they're 6 to 8 minute instrumental tracks, we can see, and it's incredible to see, that people seem to be going on their own journey in that, and then they come back to the story, and the stories are rooted, or at least inspired by Celtic influences, the Mabinogion and things like this, but they're not direct translations of anything as such, so they are just fantasy landscapes that we're creating in the moment.
I also think it's, when you think about storytelling, there are so many formats and sizes. You can have a novel that's 80 to 100,000 words. You can have a sentence. With post-rock, one of my favourite bands is God is an Astronaut, and I would love the narrative of just a single title of a song. For example, In the Distance Fading. And that just makes you think, wow, that's the title, that's the key, that's the inspiration. And then the song plays and you're imagining, what is fading? What distance? How does that relate? And I love that. So even on a small scale for titles, we're very intentional to try to weave storytelling into everything. So you can, in the live performances, you've got the anchor of the story. If you're listening online, we try to influence things with sounds and also very intentional title choices and artwork to give you that element of the story as well.
And just to finish on that, on top of all these, we're trying to create an immersive experience for the listener, both digitally and in live. Some of the things we do when we're playing live is to have nature soundscapes to be played underneath the narration. So you'll hear the sound of the birds or thunderstorm or fire crackling. And then we also utilise a lot of aesthetics. So we have horns on one of our members and hooded characters with lanterns. And it's all to drive a narrative within fantasy landscape.
Single album wise, what have you got out at the moment?
So we have Revelwyr, which is an album we released last week. Revelwyr translates as warriors from Welsh, and it's because the album was recorded as a prize for winning the Swansea Battle of the Bands. It's been really well received. It's on all streaming platforms right now, and I think a massive part of that reception is the Bloodstock community, which we're so incredibly proud and honoured and grateful to be part of. It's been added to so many Bloodstock playlists and things like that that we really, really appreciate you listening to the album, so thank you. And then in terms of physical media, the album is also in vinyl production, which should be available from the autumn. And we're also touring the album with lots of gigs right now through the remainder of the year, going across the UK from Liverpool to London, back home in Wales, and all of those tour dates are available on our social channels, Instagram, Facebook and our website.
Does the album also incorporate the stories which linking the songs, or?
We played around with different ideas to have separate story tracks. What we settled on was a little bit of spoken word right before the last track, if you listen to the whole previous track, to give you a little Easter egg or a clue as to what the live experience is like, because we like to keep the live experience as something else you get to have if you come to a show, rather than just being a reproduction of an album. However, we're very interested right now in recording a live album of the set we did today, which will include the storytelling. So if you do want that as well as a listening experience back home, there'll be a live album available, hopefully over the next few months, that'll give you that too.
We're also really excited to say that we're in the process of writing our second album as well, and it's going to incorporate all the elements we know work in a live setting and then just build on that. So we're super excited to release that probably 2026.
And you say that it's very heavily Celtic inspired. How much of that is from the Welsh side?
For me, when we think about the Welsh side, it's more the landscapes and the history and the castles that have inspired it for me. Rather than think about what is a particularly Celtic scale or a Celtic instrument to use, it's more the landscape we grew up in and how do those influence us and how do we express the Welsh landscape through music and the Welsh folklore and the Welsh past. That's what it's like for me anyway.
And would you use the Welsh language in parts of?
The problem is, none of us are fluent Welsh speakers. I take Welsh lessons, I'm learning right now. I'd love to become a fluent Welsh speaker, so we try to use it wherever we can with the album titles. I would love to incorporate some Welsh spoken word moving forward. I'm not good enough yet to do it, but when I do, I would love to do that because it's absolutely something we would love to represent. We're very proud to be Welsh and we'd be very proud to express Welsh culture, particularly through the language.
Thank you very much, guys. That's very interesting.
Thank you.